It's 7:30. It's July 20th, 2020. We are on a WebEx teleconference meeting. We'll call to order the Brainerd City Council meeting, and we will start with roll call.
Lambert.
Yes.
Stunek.
Sorry, here.
Stunek.
I think it's August 3rd.
It is, I think.
I'm looking at the wrong agenda. I better get my agenda updated.
That's all right. Try to
It's
keep
August
up,
3rd.
Dave.
You are correct.
Pritchett.
Pritchett is here.
Bevins.
Here.
Erickson. W. Erickson.
Yes.
T. Erickson.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
And Badeau.
Here.
Okay, that brings us to the next item on the August 3rd agenda, which I believe is the approval of the agenda.
So
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Roll call.
Oh, sorry. We'll do a roll call vote.
Lambert.
Yes.
Stunek.
Aye again.
Pritchett.
yes.
Bevins.
Yes.
W. Erickson.
Yes.
T. Erickson.
Yes.
And Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. That brings us to item number 4, the consent calendar. Notice to public, all matters listed are considered routine by the council and will all be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the council votes on the motion to be adopted by roll call.
Move to adopt, Evans.
Lambert, second.
A motion by Bevins and a second by Lambert to adopt the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert.
Yes.
Stunek.
Yes.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Bevins.
Yes.
W. Erickson.
Yes.
T. Erickson.
Yes.
And Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. That brings us to item number 5, which is the stormwater retrofit analysis for the city of Brainerd, Minnesota. Take it away, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So we have Sean Tracy, who was the consultant that worked on our stormwater retrofit plan. This was a culmination of and funds from the city of Brainerd, the Soil and Water Conservation District, and the Mississippi Headwaters Board. The plan really provides us with recommendations and results of an assessment of our stormwater infrastructure within the city. Kind of divides the city into 7 watersheds and provides us with some best management practices that is identified in the report. And so Sean's here tonight to present some of the outcomes of the report, and what you'll see attached in your packet is the final Brainerd Stormwater Retrofit Analysis Report, along with the presentation that Sean has made up to present to you guys tonight. So we'll probably hold questions until the end of the presentation, but I think, Sean, you can go ahead and take it away.
That sounds great. Before I start, how much time should I take? I don't want to take your whole evening up. Is it 15 minutes, Paul?
About 15 is right, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I really appreciate the opportunity. I wish it was in person. I much prefer that, but I look forward to meeting you all soon down the road here. Paul did a great job of sort of summarizing. I'm just going to kind of go over a couple of the highlights for you, give you an idea of what we did. If you could move to the next slide, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So you can see here sort of the overview I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to start talking about kind of the foundation, what we all talked about with the stakeholders and together with the city to kind of what's the need, what's the purpose, and what's the outcomes we're looking for. Paul did mention that you've got some fantastic partners here locally. The Conservation District and Mississippi Headwaters Management Organization are great at providing not only technical resources, data, etc., potentially field time here and there, but also can leverage the almighty funding dollar. And a lot of the work that was done in this this report gets you positioned then to go ahead and pursue some state funding for a lot of the implementation. So don't lose those partnerships. They're fantastic. We've been working with them for years, and they're great folks. You can go to the next one. That's fine. On the next slide after that. So for the drivers and goals here, as I mentioned, we all got together very early in the process, the stakeholders, and Paul expressed really a need to find a tool that would really facilitate a clear, targeted, and prioritized implementation strategy for the city to work on not only projects that address the needs of the upcoming TMDL for sediment treatment before discharge to the river, but also to leverage state funding like we mentioned before. It also made sense for all the stakeholders that essentially for every dollar spent, it's a good idea to find projects that not only do a good job of treating pollutant, but also provide some additional benefits to the city. You're in the middle. I'm not sure what the status of your current comp planning is. I know that it was underway, but this fits very nicely into that and some of the goals that Paul expressed. It can kind of get lumped into three general categories, sort of economic values, social values, and environmental values. And so we tried to whittle down some projects that checked more than just the pollutant treatment value, so that you had more bang for the buck there. Lastly, it's important to understand that the results of the analysis are going to fit really nicely into the city comp plan and the capital improvement planning that Paul will be putting together as the years go through. The other added benefit of doing this study was a good portion of the groundwork for the mapping and understanding of the infrastructure can serve double duty. Paul mentioned that we're working on a H&H model for you right now. We just started, and a lot of the work that was done early in the stormwater water quality analysis can be used directly in the H&H model. You can go to the next slide. I already mentioned the partners. Paul already mentioned the partners, so I think we can probably just skip this slide. But again, feel free to reach out to Melissa Barrick and Tim Terrell at any time. They're fantastic partners for the city. You can go to the background slide. I just wanted to give you some kudos too, because I'm not sure if all of the council members were around at the time, but about 8 years ago, Brainerd was the very first city up here in the upper 400 miles of the Mississippi River to do one of these studies. I had the privilege of working with Melissa Barrick and the city engineer at the time to do a study of a portion of your city in Buffalo Creek. Shortly after that, and during that time, there was some creek bluff stabilization going on as well with some funding from the Clean Water Fund. That Buffalo Creek plan then led to a Clean Water Fund grant application, and there were some implementations done as the result of that. The last thing I just want to mention on this slide is you're really well positioned to provide information, and you probably already have, for the RAPs and the TMDL that's coming, or that should be published here soon. There also will be a comprehensive watershed management plan for the greater Mississippi drainage area that you're a part of, that a lot of the things that are called out in this plan will dovetail very nicely into. I also want to just congratulate you guys too, because this is probably, I don't know how many I've done now, but it's over 50 of these studies. A lot of them in Minnesota, a lot of them in other cities, from Alaska down to South Carolina. And I can honestly say that you guys are now one of the top best prepared cities to implement water quality practices in your city. So I appreciate and congratulate you for that. You can move to the process slide. I'll very briefly touch on this. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, the nuts and bolts, but generally speaking, there's a sort of a 5-step process that I use on these studies, and there's sort of hierarchical sequence steps to identify basically the greatest return on investment. Years ago, when I was training people at the state as a state employee, it occurred to me that we're doing a lot of random acts of conservation, and I was trying to find a way to compare apples to apples, one site to the next, which led to this process that a bunch of us at the conservation districts back in the day started to develop together after a few studies in Washington County. So it's basically, like I mentioned, a hierarchical process that starts really broad with relative comparisons between opportunities. Then it moves to a much more refined modeling-based approach. Each location is verified and visited in the field. And then we consider what types of BMPs might fit in that given spot where there's a potential for a retrofit. And then each one of the subwatersheds is screened against a relative return on investment based on some criteria that the stakeholders worked on with us to see what kind of added value you're going to get. Lastly, each alternative is evaluated for the pollutant removal over a 30-year period for owning and operating it, so that you can compare between different BMPs. You can move to the results slide. This slide just talks about something that Paul mentioned earlier. The city was really divided into major watersheds to facilitate easier modeling runs, quicker modeling runs, and also for Paul, so he's got a copy of the model now. And as he and his staff work on projects in the city, they don't have to open a monster model. They can open up a smaller model and work with it a little more efficiently. Each one of the major watersheds was then divided into smaller subwatersheds or pipe sheds. And then the scoring criteria that you see here on the screen was applied to each one of those subwatersheds. These are the 6 sort of additional value criteria that were identified, and each one of them had a kind of a scoring from essentially 1 to 5 that we sort of subjectively evaluated the value of each one of the projects to get a first brush across the city. Then it moved into the modeling world. You can go to the next slide. So again, 7 major watersheds that added up to 76 subwatersheds, and then we ranked them and found the top 5 priority subwatersheds and developed models for those. We have existing conditions models for the entire city. So as you move through implementation and you move beyond the priority subwatersheds, Paul and his staff can very easily upload alternatives and consider the pros and cons of one alternative versus another. We also identified over 300 optimally located BMP locations throughout the entire city, so that you've got a map of if you're going to do things in another subwatershed at a later time in the future, you've got some guidance there. You know right where to go, and you know what type of BMP will fit in that spot. Then it's just really a matter of coming up with a design and implementing it, and Paul can run a model of their performance for reporting related to your MS4 permit. Each year you are required to report on your progress towards meeting water quality standards for the Mississippi River, as well as for the TMDL waste load allocation. You can go to the next slide. Give you some idea of what kind of impact this is going to have. If you just look at the top 5 priority subwatersheds, there's over 100 tons of sediment export on average per year. I modeled 30 years of data in 1-hour increments for precipitation, and this is the modeled export on an average year. That equates to about 670 pounds of phosphorus as well. It's quite a bit, but if you go to the next slide, what this shows are the top subwatersheds and various alternatives. And if you were to implement a lot of the projects that are in the top 5 subwatersheds at the level we recommend you do it, you're going to cut that sediment export in half, and you will cut the phosphorus down to about 40, you'll reduce it to 40% from what it's currently discharging, which is a significant stride towards meeting TMDL load allocations. So the nice thing about the table and the reports is it really details out all the costs for implementation. It includes construction, it includes annual maintenance, it includes intermittent and overhaul maintenance over a 30-year period. And it details what kind of activities need to be done so that when Paul develops his CIP and his work plan from year to year, he knows what to budget for maintenance if you move forward with some of the implementation here. So it's not a surprise when it comes to planning for labor. You can certainly go to the next slide. So some take-home messaging. I think the real value of these, as I've seen through the years, is not only does it give clear direction and gives you some defensible sort of priority planning for your capital improvement projects, it really positions you well for funding. The two main sources of funding that you're probably going to be pursuing in the future are clean water funds and then some project priority list funds from the Public Facilities Authority. That's managed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I'm currently working with the city of Baxter on these two applications for a project on Whiskey Creek. They both look like they're good. So we'll just see how those turn out. But a large number of cities up here have been through this process now that I've worked on that have gotten funding. I think I've worked on 11 cities up here. The ones that have done the comprehensive planning like you just did for stormwater retrofits and have applied or are currently applying for grants are you guys. You've done this once before. Baxter, I just mentioned. Bemidji, we're in design right now for a major project up there that was called out from the same process that you went through. Grand Rapids, same thing. They implemented the big stormwater wetland, and they're on year 2 after implementation, and it looks fantastic. I encourage you next time you're in Grand Rapids to check that out. And then the city of Coleraine, they got funded this year as well. Both Bemidji and Baxter got funded this year. I helped with the grant applications. The Bemidji project was 0.4% away from the top funded project, the #1 project in the state out of about 140 applicants. And Coleraine was, I think, #6. So you're very well positioned for funding in the future. As I mentioned before, this really does help with the comp plan, informs the CIP, and a lot of the work that was done for this on the early stages, the GIS stages, and the mapping stages had already been done. There's a little more detail that needs to be done for the H&H modeling, but a lot of the watershed delineation and data transfer and review of the stormwater infrastructure data has been completed. And the last slide, that's my contact information. I know this is a whirlwind of stuff, and I tend to talk a little bit fast. So if you have any questions, you can certainly direct them to Paul, and he can get to me, but you're more than welcome to call or email me at any time with any questions about this. As Paul mentioned, you've got the slideshow that should include my notes that I just presented, and you should have the report. It's fantastic reading. It'll keep you awake. You'll be thrilled, I'm sure. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Paul or I. And with that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Sean. Does anybody on the council have any questions of Sean right now or of Paul? I'm not seeing any questions, Sean. We'll let you know, or we'll get any questions we come up with to Paul, and he'll get them to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I look forward to it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
That brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, which is the council committee reports. 6A is Safety and Public Works Committee, Alderman Bevins. You're muted, Alderman Bevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably a good thing during that last presentation that I had a lot of questions. We have 4 agenda items. Let me get my agenda pulled up here. Item number 1 is the food trucks ordinance review discussion. I'd ask Mr. Chansky if he can give you an update before I make the motion of what the procedure is should we decide to do anything tonight on modifying the existing ordinance. Mr. Chansky?
Thank you, Alderman Bevins, Mr. President, members of the council. So as I told the Safety and Public Works Committee, I did speak with Attorney Langle this afternoon. to clarify what the process would be should the council decide to kind of make it a more immediate change of temporarily suspending a part or amending part of the ordinance regarding food trucks. He stated that because this cannot be directly tied or wouldn't easily be directly tied to the health pandemic like patios were back in May, June, you would have to go through the full amendment process, which would require a drafting of an amendment, a public hearing, and 2 readings before such an amendment could be made. So with that, I brought it to the commission to discuss what would you like to do. Would you like to proceed with an amendment? What would you like that amendment to look like? Table the item for further discussion. What would the commission, what would the council like to do at this point before we as staff proceed on this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Chansky. Mr. Chair, the motion out of committee is to direct the food truck ordinance review discussion back to planning and zoning, and I so move.
Lambert, second.
We have a motion by Bevins and a second by Lambert to send the food truck discussion back to the planning and zoning. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
W. Erickson, W. Erickson,
Yes.
T. Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Alderman Bevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 2 is just FYI. That's the 8th Street Northeast cut across traffic discussion. As you can see, there's some examples of the signs ordered by the engineering department. They should be up shortly. We clearly won't know for sure how well they've done until some length of time, and maybe even next fall has come around to see if it works. The engineering department has notified Google with no response that we have posted this no trucks, and this is just FYI, Mr. Chair, unless anybody has any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll move on to item 3, and we'll watch that 8th Street throughout the fall. Item 3 is improvements 13-21, 1909, 1916, 1920, and 1921. They're all the Northeast Brainerd construction projects. And the motion regarding change order number 2, the motion is to approve change order number 2 in the amount of $16,313, and I so move.
Second, Erickson.
A motion by Bevins and a second by Erickson. Any discussion, Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really 2 separate items. The first item is $5,390. That's some corrugated metal 12-inch piping that drains on the backside of McDonald's. That is actually assigned to 1916, and that'll come out of the Storm Sewer Fund 238. When we looked at that, we looked at what went under the road, but we didn't notice that where the outfall is, the whole bottom of the pipe is junk. And the other $10,923 is rock bedding for water main. That will come out of DPU's portion of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
T. Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Alderman Bevins.
Thank you. Our last item is number 4, the Laurel Street Bridge repair. Engineer Sandy's got some great pictures as to what happened, but it's primarily FYI, so you can see the going rates for the repair. As you all remember, we had to do this because it was washing out, not so much the support for the bridge, but the slope below the bridge. Expectations are this will run roughly $60,000, Paul. And we'll be responsible to pay for this when the bill comes in. The other part of the project is we're redoing a couple of the rubber glands, one on this bridge. That's, from what I understand, the expansion joint, where that goes across the top of the bridge. We clean them out a couple times a year, but eventually the rubber wears out. And we do have one on College Street that we'll be replacing in the near future as well. We should have a total bill shortly, but budget $60,000 in your brain for this repair.
No
That's the
motion.
FYI, Mr. Chair, unless there's any questions, it's the end of the report.
Thank you, Alderman Bevins. Any questions on the sloping repair? No. End of report. That'll bring us to the next item, which is subpoint B, the Personnel and Finance Committee. Alderman Pritchett.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 3 items on our agenda, the first of which is approval of bills. Nothing extraordinary on the approval of bills this time, and I so move.
Stunek, second.
We have a motion by Pritchett, a second by Stunek to approve the bills. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
T. Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Alderman Pritchett.
All right, our second item is the Fire Department Relief Association Annual Report. A little background on this. Their investments, they had a good year in 2019. They got a 20% return on the fund. So they're looking at increasing the benefit from $10,750 to $12,000, which would be 105% funded. They still would have a surplus of $323,177. And I am moving, out of committee, we are moving to approve the increase of benefits to $12,000 for this year, and then also to authorize staff to sign the annual reports. And I so move.
Erickson, second.
A motion by Pritchett, a second by Tad Erickson to approve the report and approve the increase in the pension. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Alderman Pritchett.
All right, our third and final agenda item is the retirement of Park Director Tony Saylor. So the motion is to acknowledge Mr. Saylor's retirement, since it's already been accepted by the Park Board, and authorize his severance payout as per city policy, and I so move.
Stunek, second.
We have a motion by Pritchett, a second by Stunek. Any discussion? Alderman Pritchett.
Just really quickly, what'll happen, his last day will be December 18th, and after that, he will then be drawing off of his vacation days. The Park Board will be discussing their next step in their meeting on August 25th.
Thank you. And that's
And we'd
great.
like to thank him for his service and wish him all the best when he finally does retire. So,
Right. I love that he's given us such a big notice so we can try and figure out what we're going to do without him. Alderman Bevins, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to know, is Dave Bedell going to be applying for this position as well?
When openings come, there will be Dave Bedell.
Superman.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we will vote on the motion by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
T. Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries.
End of report.
Thank you, Alderman Pritchett. That brings us to item number 7 on the agenda, unfinished business, 7A, call for applicants, Mayor Bedell.
Well, I wasn't going to do it, but Kelly, now I'm going to have to. This one's a good one. All right. right. The never-ending story of Mayor Recommends. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. This is a call for applicants. The Mayor Recommends. I've got terms expiring 12/31 of said year. We've got the Cable Advisory Committee, one term expiring 2021, two terms expiring 2022. We also have the Charter Commission, two terms expiring 2020, one term expiring 2021, and I believe we have a full boat there. We can actually start meeting with that group, but we'd like to get more people on board. We also have, I do not. Oh my gosh, did we clear up our, ladies and gentlemen, we have cleared up the EDA. I don't have the one strange starting in September item tonight. We are just all at the end of the year. So other than that, we have applicants that we need for the Water Tower Committee and the Parking Commission, which brings me to item B, if I may.
You may.
All right, I would like to recommend Brenda Billman-Arndt to the Parking Commission.
Looking for a motion to approve. Alderman Pritchett.
I move to approve.
Lambert, second.
A motion by Pritchett, second by Lambert to approve the mayor's appointment. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Sure.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
And that motion carries. That brings us to the next item, which is City Hall front steps repair update. That's probably Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. We do have Mike Anglin and Kevin Curie here tonight to give the council kind of an update of project scope, kind of present the drawings and the pricing we've received from Brado Brothers. You'll recall that a couple meetings ago, you guys authorized us to move forward with Contegrity and the contractor to do some investigatory work on the front steps to determine what the foundation looks like, how we can come up with some footings or some drawing of what we're looking for. The council also authorized to proceed with the option of a concrete stair design with existing granite-faced risers and more of an aggregate tread to provide a safe stairway. So we've worked with WSN, Contegrity, and Brado Brothers to formulate a scope and drawings, and Brado has priced this out for us. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Kevin and Mike to kind of give us the synopsis of what we're looking at.
Thank you, Paul. Mike, if you're on, do you want to go through the design first and then we'll talk about the price?
Sounds good. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
A little bit.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. We presented this concept a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks back. It is to take a further look into the existing condition of the stairs. And so we have had a time to open that up and take a look at the existing conditions. We've been able to remove the existing granite, salvage that, and also take a look structurally at what we need to do. So at this point, we feel confident that we've extracted as much material as we can and what is necessary in order to put back new material and install what we've proposed. So we're excited to identify the scope of work and confirm that on site. I'm sure most of you have driven by and taken a look at it. But I just really appreciate the opportunity that you've allowed us to explore the existing conditions. And so between Kevin, myself, and Brado, we've certainly put a lot of thought into that. And also had our structural engineer on site too to take a look at things for us. So we did put together technical drawings that reflected the overall scope. It does include now to also refinish the wing walls, we call them, that are on both sides, to put a new finish on there that's more consistent with the existing limestone on the building. And also we work with Darren with the city of Brainerd to confirm the handrail configuration as well. So collectively, everyone has really done a great job in responding to this request to really look into the front steps. And so we're very confident with what we've presented to Verado for pricing. And we do have that information back, and I believe you've been privy to that information. But again, just appreciative for the opportunity to really dig into this and do what's right for the long term. Kevin, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so. As far as the design goes, we got those drawings to the contractor. They turned it around pretty quickly. They got input from their subcontractors, and we were able to come up with a price that's well below the ballpark figure that we put together prior to the last meeting.
You know, the one thing I'd like to add, Kevin, if I may, is that we will be sequencing the pour of the concrete in 4 different sections. And so as we've taken a look at this and ensuring that this is the right solution long term, we will be forming this up and pouring it in different sections so that it naturally provides some control joints or construction joints. So pouring this back in and setting everything may take a little bit of time, but I just wanted you all to be aware of why we're doing it that way. Again, we just want to ensure the longevity of this design solution and what we're proposing construction-wise. So we can certainly answer any questions that you may have for us.
Alderman Bevins.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No center railing, guys?
Correct, Councilman Bevins. It's an interesting situation. The configuration of the stairs and the landing at the very top by the exit door. If you were to install a handrail that conformed with code, it would extend past that top riser, and it would actually impede on the required clearance at that top door. So it's kind of interesting because if you install a railing to comply with code, you are at the same time not complying with code. And so it really provided a situation where egress would be hindered by that center rail. And so we elected to reach out to Darren with the City of Brainerd Building Department and just confirm that that would be okay if we did that. But again, it's just to eliminate the congestion and the safety hazard that would be presented if we were to install that center rail. So that's our take. That's my take as the design professional working for you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I'm ready for a motion to accept staff's recommendation to accept Verado Brothers bid in the amount posted in the agenda.
How much was the bid?
$59,000 and change.
Thank you.
Lambert, so moved.
Erickson, second.
Lambert, second by Wayne Erickson, to go with staff's recommendation to approve the bid from Verado Brothers to construct the front steps at City Hall. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert. Stunek. Stunek.
Yes.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Bevins.
Yes.
W. Erickson.
Yes.
T. Erickson.
Yes.
And Johnson. Mr. President. We appear to have lost our president, Mr. Vice President.
Is that me?
It is.
All right, let's move on to number 8, new business. 8A is the CARES relief funding. Jennifer, are you bringing us up to speed on this, or is there anything we need to do?
So I am Alderman Bevins. So just Connie and I are going to kind of tag team this agenda item. So as you know, the city of Brainerd got $1.035 million in CARES Act funds. And the current guidance really is pretty distinct and has 3 elements in which these funds can be used. One is that the expense has to be necessary and due to COVID-19, and that the city must document this fact. Number two is that it has to be unaccounted for, so that the expenditure wasn't part of the 2020 budget. And then number three, that the cost has to have incurred between March 1st of 2020 and November 15th of 2020. The funds were also able to cover BPU as well as the library. So staff has been working on this for a couple of weeks, and we've really kind of looked at this in three buckets. Our bucket number one is those expenditures that we've had to date. Bucket number two are expenditures that we are anticipating between now and November 15th. And then bucket number three is the amount that we could use for small businesses and or nonprofits for grants for COVID-related expenses. And so one of the things that we really want to do is go through these items with the council. There is an attachment on the packet. And so with this, I'm going to turn it over to Connie, and Connie's going to walk through some of these line items. We just want to make sure that we're in agreement on this.
So as Jennifer says, as we're going through these items, we need to make sure that we keep those three things in mind: necessary and due to COVID, not budgeted, and the time period when it occurs. So we've already did the small business relief grants of up to $3,000 in grants, and we spent $113,500 on those grants. When we initially did the grants, we said that we were hoping to reimburse ourselves with CARES funds if and when they became available. We had precautionary administrative leave for the patrol officers. They were paid for 10 hours every pay period without working to keep our staff healthy as long as possible. And then we had our parks, streets staff that were off for 2 weeks when we were not ready. We were not able to have them work and be able to maintain the social distancing and those kind of items due to COVID. We had the records management staff. They were, during a stay at home, they were alternating shifts to keep our staff healthy. And because they did not have access to they all could not be working from home because we did not have access for them to be able to do so. Due to, there's a COVID leave, it stands, I can't remember the acronym for that, but basically it is employees are allowed up to 80 hours before December 31st if they qualify. Sometimes it's paid at 100%, sometimes it's paid at 2/3. We've had one employee that was eligible for the 2/3 of the hourly rate. The liquor license fee grant reduction. This one we need to work on our wording to make sure that this covers. I did a listserv and there was kind of all over the place. Some cities were saying yes, it was specifically allowed. Others were saying no. So we just need to work with CLA in order to make sure that we have the adequate wording. But we felt that we had done it over the whole use or all of the license holder. There was definitely a need for it because they were closed, and that we did it on a consistent basis for everyone. We did the marketing campaign for $25,000. Again, when we authorized or when council authorized this campaign, they said we were going to reimburse ourselves with CARES dollars if and when they became available. We talked about the school resource officer, that his duties changed from being a school resource officer to being a patrol officer. Those were his wages for that time period. Our street foreman has overtime due to the staggered shifts at the street department. We obviously have the cleaning, sanitation, and PPE items for our staff. And then the cables and different various things that we had for people to work from home.
Mr. Chair, or Mr. Vice Chair.
Jan.
I cannot hear anything.
You had a triangle the whole time I was talking, Jan.
Oh, so Jan, you kind of lost connection for a bit. We're about at the end of page 2 of the spreadsheet right now.
Right.
Thank you.
Basically what we did is went through line by line. The work from home plan, we had some miscellaneous. We had the supplies for the decon trailer, some of the attorney fees that we had due to help us do our work from home order, our preparedness plan, and any COVID-19 questions we had. You can see that we have the pavilion rental refunds, the park a day rental, and the tournament refunds. We do not have any dollars amount assigned to those because we feel that those were would be replacing revenue, which is not allowed via the CARES Act. The library had a very minor expense. They needed a track phone and some postage for furlough notices. And then BPU had about $5,400 for early morning cleaning labor and various cleaning supplies and various PPE for their staff. So to date, we've spent $320,946.
Connie, do you want to go bucket? Because I have a few questions already. Do you want to go bucket by bucket, or do you want to get through the whole list and then just jump around?
I think if we do bucket by bucket, I think that would be best.
Okay, so I understand the school resource officer because we did refund a portion of that back to the school district that they didn't use. But going back up here on the first page, parks maintenance staff, street maintenance staff, record management staff, I don't see how those are unbudgeted. Just because we made the decision to send them home doesn't mean it wasn't part of our budget to employ them. So how are we justifying that that's an unbudgeted expenditure related to COVID?
Because we were behind by having them be off, we got behind. So we were not able to do the maintenance around the city like we would have. So basically what we're saying is that that time was significantly different from the line item that were budgeted. They were not doing maintenance like we thought they were going to be doing maintenance.
But we budgeted to employ them.
Right.
And we continued to employ them.
Right. But due to COVID, their job duties changed because they could not be at work for those 2 weeks.
That's okay with our auditors, that justification? Seems very generous.
I think there was a little bit more that they wanted us to put into the documentation, but they did not have a problem per se that was an issue.
Because we definitely budgeted for staff. I just have a hard time with that one. I understand the school resource officer, but the other people I don't. Everything else seems fine to me. Does anybody else have questions on any of the bucket one items?
Mr. Chair,
Really?
I understand Jan might have a question, but I have a motion when you're ready.
Oh, let's get Jan's question. Jan?
Mr. Chair, I guess we were paying our staff for this. I mean, they were being paid. They did not lose their income. So I guess I kind of agree with President Johnson. Why are we reimbursing when they're already being paid? It was related to overtime or something.
Right, and I guess I understand the staff foreman overtime, but the other employees' general salaries that were budgeted, and they were deemed essential employees that the governor didn't force them to go home. We just sent them home out of an abundance of caution.
We didn't have the ability to have them work from home due to COVID. So it was either pay them or lay them off. And if we laid them off,
or make them work. We could have sent them into work, but we didn't out of an abundance of caution. But that wasn't a choice Governor Walz made or COVID made. That was a choice the city made.
And we can work with our auditors to make sure that that's okay. I mean, I
just don't want the federal government to come in and say, you owe us $100,000. You can't reimburse yourself for the salaries that you had budgeted.
I agree. So we're working on an agreement with Clifton Larson Allen to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row as well.
Okay. Anybody else total bucket one questions?
So, Mr. Chair,
Jennifer,
if I may, so I think what I hear you and Alderwoman Lambert saying are the concerns about those three buckets or dollar amounts where we have staff. I think one of the things that we're talking about doing is running these by Clifton Larson Allen to make sure that they are in agreement. This money will trigger a single audit. And so we'll be audited on the spending of these dollars. So I think one of the things that Connie and I have talked about is making sure we're running these numbers by Clifton Larson Allen and to make sure that they are in agreement with them.
Okay. Kelly, you had a motion regarding bucket number one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve bucket number one at $320,946.22, providing approval by our auditors, and I so move.
Second, Pritchett.
We have a motion by Bevins and a second by Pritchett to approve the total amount for bucket one pending approval by our auditors. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
T. Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Connie, bucket number 2.
So before we start with bucket number 2, we would just like to say that staff feels that this is probably going to be the only funds that the city receives for COVID-related expenditures. So when we were going through these, we were really thinking about things down the future as well that would cover, that we could free up some levy dollars down the road that qualified for CARES Act dollars. So BPU is doing the access control system and IP cameras into their wastewater treatment plant. To allow for the way that they're changing. The new access system would allow BPU to remotely control access to the service center and the wastewater treatment plant. So as you can see the explanation, their interaction with customers and vendors are in the process of changing, and this new security system would allow this to happen. We're looking at permanent, I shouldn't call this camera access to City Hall. Basically, we've been using Ring and we're running into glitches. The system is not working. There's a short time frame to communicate with individuals entering into City Hall, and this would allow a more permanent controlled access into City Hall. I guess it shouldn't say camera system necessarily as much as it should just be a remote access system into City Hall. We have been running into with issues with Ring a lot. Residents cannot hear us. We have a hard time hearing them. It's caused a lot of problems. Fire department equipment, this should be actually accessed again, not necessarily the cameras, but we all have badges now to get into City Hall. We would like the fire department and the street garage to be on the same system. We did not have time to get estimates before the package went out. We have the chamber upgrades. As you know, right now, we can't do a live stream and have customers and have residents call in. And so we're looking at doing some upgrades or some additional work in the council chamber so that that residents can remote in and televise due to meetings and COVIDs. And if we have to continue to have meetings done remotely and for social distancing. We need additional monitors, laptops, desktops, and webcams, and dual factor I can never say that word. So dual verification for all employees so that they can access the network. Cannot say that word again. Those are items to be able to work from home. Migrating from Office 365 to the cloud. We are on Office 365, but we did not go to the cloud due to the cost. None of these items also are in the budget for the foreseeable future. Then we get to cubicles. Per Executive Order 2081, face coverings can be temporarily removed when you're alone in the office or with cubicle walls that are higher than face level when social distancing is maintained. Our cubes are not face level, do not meet this qualification. And so therefore our staff would have to wear masks all the time when they're at their desks. We also have some staff went ahead and made some makeshift cubicles so that they did not have to wear their mask all day. Our fire chief does kind of have some concern with the makeshift higher cubicle walls, and the new cubes were not in the City Hall budget in the next 5 years of capital planning. We're looking at doing an additional marketing campaign to continue the You Betcha We're Open campaign for Brainerd businesses as a result of them being closed to COVID, additional sanitation, PP&E, the delinquent utility bills. This is something that is under the CARES Act. We're still working through the details. It basically is a grant. Our current understanding is that the people that have utilities in arrear would need to contact the council. The council would in effect give them a grant that would release the funds to pay the utility bills. Again, our street foreman will probably continue to have overtime through November 15th due to the split shifts. Emergency Operations Center upgrades. When we realize we have the pandemic, we are not completely operational in our EOC. We have here some upgrades to our restrooms to have touchless faucets, soap dispensers, and towels at our city and park facilities. Again, this would help prevent the spread of COVID. our Jabber phone system upgrades when staff was working remotely. If staff had to make a telephone call, they were using their personal cell phones or home phones to make those calls because we could not get back into the system. And then we have a contingency of $100,000. Additional COVID leave for employees, corrections to estimates, additional WebEx subscriptions, assistance from Clifton Larson Allen, as well as our attorney, those things that might come up. So that is what we have in bucket number 2.
Okay, Connie, I have a couple questions on bucket number 2. I understand all the work from home stuff. I understand the camera access systems during a pandemic, but is it our intention to put a permanent camera system in at City Hall?
That's where I think I made a mistake, that it shouldn't necessarily be a camera system. It should be more just remote access control, I guess. And then for police and fire was so that they would have badge access like we currently do at City Hall.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, on that, one of the things that we were talking about is when you go to the police department, they have a call button that will call in. And I know our IT GIS director, Sean Strong, has been looking at a system where we could do that at City Hall and it would ring everybody's phone. So it would be a lot easier to allow access into City Hall.
So permanently lock all residents out of City Hall unless they hit the call button for the rest of time?
No.
I think we would be.
Go ahead,
Go
Connie.
ahead, Jennifer. Sorry.
No, that is not the case. It would be done in the times of the pandemic. One of the things that I mean, we just have no idea what this looks like in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months from now. Hopefully, we are able to go back to some kind of normal. But right now, with the controlled access, we just know that Ring is not working sufficiently.
Connie?
So it would also be an advantage, even after the pandemic, if people have meetings in the evening, that the doors can be locked and somebody needs to get access that is meeting late with Jennifer or myself or any other staff member, that they could still have access to City Hall without the door having to be unlocked and everybody being able to come in after hours as well.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not just trying to lock citizens out of City Hall forever because we find them annoying. I mean, there are good reasons for the police department to have the call system because they've got people there at all hours of the day and you never know when people are going to need to call in. City Hall is just City Hall. What's another one I had a question on here? The cubicles. How many employees do not have a cubicle that reaches their face?
None of our cubes are higher than face level. None of them are. They're all short walls.
The people in engineering, don't.
Yep, I take that back. The engineers.
Okay, so we don't know how many cubes we need.
Well, we do know that we need at least 2 on the 3rd floor. We need at least 1, 2, 3, 4 on the 2nd floor. And then if we go down into IT, technically they should have 2 down there as well. So we're looking at 3. Okay, Jennifer's saying 3. So we're looking at about 10 cubicles if I did my math right.
Yeah, I don't like the cubicle expenditure. I think it's office furniture that should be in the long-term capital improvement plan. I know they have the makeshift ones up on the 3rd floor now, and we need to have a window or a glass of some sort because the 2 people upstairs who don't have the high walls are tasked with keeping an eye on the counter. So we can't put a 6-foot wall in front of them when they're in charge of watching the counter.
And we have the same thing going on 2nd floor as well.
And then my final question is the delinquent utility bills. Can you go into that further for me?
And that is still kind of, the guidance is very much still up in the air. But what we feel is that people can come and file a petition with the council saying that they are in arrears. The council can grant them a grant through the CARES fund and release the CARES dollars to pay the utility.
Could we
all I know at this point.
Okay, can we make it like residential utility bills? And can we make it so, you know, whatever Big Cub Foods or NP Center or whatever isn't allowed to just stop paying their electrical bill for the rest of the year because the city will pay it? You know, can we put it that you must be a resident and it must be a residential hookup to help with utility bills?
We could look into it further. I'm not sure at this point because it's something that the MMUA just came out with some guidance.
Yeah, it seems like good support, but it seems like it could also be misused or taken advantage of. And I would, if we do it, I'd want it to go to the people who legitimately need it.
And I think there's a certain time frame too of when they were in arrears. I don't think they can be like, oh, now that we're doing this, they can go in arrears. I think it had to be at a certain time point, maybe even.
Well, the packet came out on Friday, and I promise you, I have not paid a utility bill since then.
And I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, just as you can hear from Connie, we're still kind of waiting for guidance. And I think the utility bill is certainly one of those that we're waiting for guidance. So we're just slowly, guidance is trickling in from the federal government.
And I
Okay, well,
oops, sorry.
Thank you. Those are the only questions I had on bucket 2. I just really don't like the cubicles at all, especially since you do have a makeshift thing set up. Is there any other questions, Jan?
Yes, I do. I'm going to just follow up on the utilities. I think that should be only for Brainerd residents. Should not be, because BPU does cover an area that is outside the city limits. And number 2, regarding on the first issue with access, not having, I mean, I don't want the city council or city hall shut down, but when they do the access, is that going to be something that we're going to follow through all the time? So like BPU, everybody in order to get to the buildings will have to have an access code. Anybody who wants in the streets have an access code. Because if we're spending this money, I think there's some, or this money being spent, I think it's something that, we should utilize the ability to use that as badges like we do for city hall.
Jennifer, Connie?
So, Mr. Chair, I think Woman Lambert, what the question is would we continue to use that system even when there isn't a pandemic? Is that your question?
Correct. With the entities, not other than City Hall, where City Hall should be open to the community, the residents, and it should just be opened during the working hours and like Connie said, after hours. It'd be good to have badge access. But BPU, anybody that like BPU, I would like to see that be utilized as part of their practice for security. Is that what's going to happen, or is once pandemic's done, it's going to be shut down and reactivated when another pandemic comes around?
So, Jan, are you asking about BPU, fire, and police controlled access?
Well, fire and police, I understand, but BPU, are they already on a secured access at this time prior to the epidemic?
BPU is not open to the public, but they do, their building is not open to the public, but BPU does have a drive-through. So people can access the drive-through from BPU. Stores are not open. And I'm not sure what the BPU commission is planning for the future. I think when we're referring to City Hall, we are only talking about doing this type of controlled access during a pandemic. I know, first of all, I think we're thrilled to at least be able to be open to the public and yet still have it controlled, but at least public can come in and our system just is not working. And so I think the intent with this is to have a similar system to PD, but not to operate like PD does. So we would use that system in the times of pandemic. Hopefully this goes away much sooner rather than later, and then we just open back City Hall as normally it would be. Does that answer your question?
No, because what is the first of this bucket? The first one, I guess I'm not understanding what BPU is, that money I can't, that's not up where I.
Gotcha.
So, Jan, I'm the liaison to BPU, and I was at their meeting a couple of months ago, and I just informed them of the CARES Act funding, and being that BPU is a component of the city of Brainerd, they're absolutely eligible for their expenses to be reimbursed too. So I asked them to just provide us with any expenditures they've encountered thus far, or anything they're going to encounter this year related to COVID. And this access control system is something that they want to install. I don't know much more about it other than they feel it'll help keep their staff and customers safer. Connie?
And normally, without a pandemic, they are open to the public in their service center. I mean, you can get access. Normally, if it wasn't the pandemic, you could come in and pay your bills, or you could go through the drive-through. But their supplies come in through the back way. And so right now they want to tighten the control of their supplies coming in the back of the building. That's what this control access is. So it's very similar to what we are trying to do, in that we're trying to get access to people outside of hours as well as during the pandemic. But we will not use the system when we can be fully open.
And Jan, I don't know what BPU's intentions are. I can ask them at their next meeting and follow up with you.
Yeah, I guess I would like to see if we're going to utilize it, if we're going to put it in there, it should be utilized all the time if you're doing your vendors, especially when you're doing it with vendors.
Well, hang on a second here, Jan. Mike Anglin is still with us. Mike, do you know the answer to the BPU secured access system?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Ms. Lambert, the BPU Commission is considering integrating some access control, as has been discussed. This would be to direct customers to the main entrance. Currently, right now, there are multiple access points and entrances to the site. And so what we are putting together are some concepts to actually create more public versus private entrances for site access, so for deliveries and such. And there's also an access point with the gate off of County Road 48. And so we're taking a look at different access points and providing and allowing more control over that to prevent vendors and customers from having access to the entire site. And so we have generated and put together some concepts and costs associated with that. We've spoken about that as recently as our last commission meeting, and we would certainly be able to follow up and provide you all with more detailed information if that would be your request.
Okay, that makes much more sense. So a lot of times those ones that you want to limit access, it's the way to get in is you're going to have a badge or have a code or something in order to get in. So customers and vendors aren't able to go in willy-nilly.
Sure, you bet.
Correct.
And that is that's our intent. And so we have had some very recent discussions, as recent as last week, and we do have some visuals too that will help describe and illustrate what we're trying to accomplish.
And so this would be more about a long-term versus a short-term.
It would, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You are correct. Yes, it would be. You bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks you, Jan. Any more questions? Kelly.
Mr. Chair, I tend to look at this different than all of you who have made comments so far. I look at this more as a budget or a planned best use of funds. I don't look at it as we're going to write $50,000 out to BPU customers for delinquent bills. I looked at it as these are the acceptable uses for the funds. These are planned uses or a budget of how they could be used. But I didn't anticipate that we could never make changes to it if for some reason, clearly the cubicle thing, I agree with you, Chairman Johnson, but I also bet we end up doing some expense, maybe extending plexiglass on top of our existing cubicles or something of that effect. I'm not necessarily believing or not believing that we're going to spend $50,000 on new cubicles, but I felt it was a good best use of funds to keep our employees safe. Does that make sense? I wasn't looking at it as a checkbook ledger. I just wanted to comment on that. I might be reading it wrong, and maybe Connie Hillman can confirm what I'm thinking, that we had to come up with a division of funds or send it back we could do that, which didn't seem to make sense either. So I just wanted to make that comment. And maybe once we approve this, it's got to be spent this way, but I don't think so. Having received COVID funds myself.
Thank you, Kelly. Alderman Pritchett.
Yeah, I kind of look at this a little bit differently too. Especially looking at the permanent camera, which isn't a camera. I mean, yeah, we're going to have this set up so people can be buzzed in, but and also cubicles. I think, for want of a better word, I don't think they're all going to be cubicles. I think some of them are going to be plexiglass, because you do have people sitting back that have to be able to see people coming into City Hall. I kind of look at this as, we don't know where this is going to go. If you look at some of those southern states that opened wide up and now are looking at closing again, we could see this go up and down. We need to get ourselves into a position where, if this does take a turn for the worse, we can be as available as possible to the public. And I think a lot of these measures allow us to do that. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Alderman Pritchett. Any other questions of staff on bucket 2? Mayor Bedeau.
I just wanted to make one quick comment on both the cubicles and the camera. I completely support the camera at the other locations. I don't like the idea that we're blocking access to City Hall. And I know it sounds like, it's just for the time being. But how many people are trying to get in there right now? Why are we so concerned about getting people inside? I understand right now, without the front steps, it's a need that we're needing to fit. But once the front steps are there, what does it matter if 5 people come inside City Hall? I don't understand what the big issue with this is. We've got the plexiglass behind the counters. We've got our people behind the locked doors. I don't understand what the need at City Hall is once those steps are back. With the cubicles, $50,000 is just a lot of money. And I'd like to see us find a better solution. But I also I understand that it is an amount of money that could be spent and maybe doesn't have to be spent. But when you say $50,000 is going to cubicles, $50,000 is going to cubicles. That tends to be what happens. So I completely support the idea of coming up with some kind of plexiglass thing. But $50,000 for cubicles seems outrageous. And it seems like something we could budget for in the future.
Mr. President, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman Stunek, Alderman Erickson. Alderman Erickson, any questions or comments?
Alderman Erickson here. I think they did an excellent job of projecting where these funds could be spent. I'm ready to make a motion on bucket 2.
I'm ready to hear your motion.
Well, let's approve the bucket 2 expenditures that could hopefully these funds will be here to meet the needs. So let's just approve bucket 2.
Second.
We have a motion by Wayne Erickson, a second by Pritchett to approve bucket number 2 as presented. Any discussion?
Sure, this is Albert. Could we just have clarification for Connie? Is this more as what Council Bevan said, that this is more of a budget type format versus that this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to be paying? Is this more of a budget issue, more of a budget type layout for us on budget 2?
I would think it's more of a budget. These were things that staff thought of that we could use these CARES dollars for, where we wouldn't have to use levy dollars down the road to make these improvements to keep our staff safe.
Okay.
Excellent. And I have one final question too, Connie, since you've mentioned it a couple times that we're saving levy dollars. Will you tell me how many levy dollars we're saving? Just so we can keep that into account at budget time.
Well, I would say we no longer have to levy for the cubicles. We no longer have to levy for the improvements for the EOC. We no longer have to levy if we go ahead and do the touchless faucet, soap dispensers, and towels. We no longer have to budget for those items. We could freeze up those levy dollars for other items that the council might consider we need.
So we get to start the budget discussion this year at a -2%.
Whatever you would like to do, Alderman Johnson. Whatever you would like to do.
I kid. Any other discussion on the motion?
I just one other thing. I did do a listserv to the finance directors because I wanted to know what percentage Are they using in-house? What percentage have they spent already? What are they planning on doing for businesses? And it was really kind of all over the board. I talked to one city that received over $5 million in COVID relief grants, and they said they are putting that all into internal because this is the only funds that they feel they're going to get for CARES or for CARES dollars going into the future. And so they said that their allocation from the county was the only thing they were going to use for what we're considering bucket number 3, additional grants and loans. So it was kind of all over the place. A lot of them were like, no, we're keeping it all internal. We're doing it all for our staff and to make our city hall safe. So I just thought I would share that as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Yes.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
T. Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, and that motion carries. And bucket 3, I guess we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. Did you want to touch on that briefly right now, Jennifer?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, members of the council, thank you. So this is, again, bucket 1, we know we have numbers. We know what we've spent. Bucket 2 are estimates. And then you notice that Connie did put some contingency in there, leaving about $246,500 for this bucket 3, which is small business and or nonprofit grants for COVID-related expenditures. It is our intent to bring back some recommendations to the city council at the August 17th meeting on how our recommendations on spending that $246,500.
Thank you. So that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which I don't have up. And that is
Council goals.
adopt count 2020 to 2022 city council goals. Probably City Administrator Bergman.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Members of the council, as you know, on July 13th, we did have that work session. We did a survey with council members, boards and commissions, and department heads prior to that, asking everybody to rank the comp plan goals and strategies by 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15-year goals, and then ongoing or completed. The council did identify strategies which would be included in our 2022 goals. There is an attachment in your packet that lays all of those out by category: land use, community character, housing, mobility, economic development, parks and rec, facilities and infrastructure, public safety, and natural resources. So one of the reasons for doing these goals was to tie this to our performance framework for our pay for performance. One of the things that you'll notice is that there are some departments that aren't specifically touched in this, but we think that this is something that we can work with on our pay for performance framework model. In addition, since it is the comprehensive plan, a lot of these fall in the community development department. And so we would just caution you that we do know that these are ambitious goals. And then last but not least, what I would point out is all of the ones that are highlighted in yellow were the ones that were changed from the comp plan language and put in here based on the discussion at the July 13th work session. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we're just asking that the council adopt the City of Brainerd comprehensive goals from August 1st of 2020 through December 31st of 2022, and staff would be reporting back to council on these goals on a quarterly basis. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm ready for a motion. Alderman Pritchett.
So moved.
We have a motion by Pritchett, a second by Lambert to adopt the city goals for 2020 through 2022. Any discussion? I'll just say one thing. It's looking a lot better, and I hope this helps you, Jennifer, on your next quarterly talk and reviewing the department heads and when the council's reviewing you, because at our last one, there was a lot of real vague ideas, and it's good to get some things written down where we can identify specific goals that we're working towards. So this is moving in the right direction, I think. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote by roll call.
Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins. Bevins.
He's not at his desk.
W. Erickson,
Yes.
T. Erickson,
Yes.
and Johnson.
Yes, motion carries. The next item up is item number 9, public forum at 8:51. I'll open up the public forum. I know Mike Anglin does have something to share with us for public forum, so we'll start with him. Take it away, Mike.
He's with Kelly.
I think this call-in user number 3 needs to be unmuted so that we can hear him. There we go. Mike, are you there?
Hello.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Hello, everybody.
Oh,
Thank
there we
you.
go. Hey, Mike.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give you an update from a Brainerd restoration standpoint. We were successful in receiving a grant from Crowing Power Community Trust for $2,500 for the installing sound for downtown. So as I reported late last year, that is our target project for this year. And so I just want to report on that, and we're getting closer. So we're really excited and shooting for possibly by the holidays season of this year to have that installed. So Mr. Mayor, I have not figured out how to have it smell like Christmas, but we are working on that too. But anyway, I just wanted to give you all an update, and very good news, very, very appreciative that we were successful in that grant. And shout out to John Schomer with our group, Brainerd Restoration, for heading up that effort. So that was my update for you all tonight.
Thank you, Mike. It looks like Jan has a question for you. Jan?
Okay,
Jan.
Does the restoration, would that help us all in a lot of our historical buildings that we have around town? You know, that was something important that we put in our goals. Is that something the restoration can help us identify? Or have you?
You know what, Jan, we would certainly like to help out in any way we can with my work in particular with historic preservation with numerous buildings in town. I would love to help out in any way I can, but as an organization, we certainly would like to help out. And so please do reach out to me for anything that you can think of. We would certainly like to help out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mayor, you had something?
Mike, you got 4 months. 4 months is a long time in the world of smells. We can figure it out.
Okay. You're on. Well, I will call you up shortly. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We'll see you later.
You bet.
Doesn't look like we have any other call-in users, so we'll move on to staff reports. Any verbal updates since the packet came out? Any staff members have anything to add? David Chansky.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to share with the council that I had the privilege to present the Mississippi Landing Trailhead project to the LCCMR Commission this past Thursday. I think the presentation went well. I just want to take the opportunity to thank first the council for supporting that project, as well as the Riverfront Committee that's really been pushing that for the last number of years. Has done a lot of hard work on that. Ashley Kaisershot with Sourcewell, Holly Larson, and Barrett Steenrod with the National Park Service, who really were influential in bringing this project together. And finally, I just want to thank Representative Josh Heinzman, who serves on that commission. During the presentation, he took the opportunity to really sing the project's praises and encourage the commission to support that project. We should be hopefully hearing if we'll be taking the next step in that process within the month. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, David. Any other updated staff reports? Non-Administrator Bergman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did submit a written report. I just want to highlight a couple of things. Mr. Mayor, with his hat as Executive Director of Brainerd Community Action, did provide the city of Brainerd a letter thanking them for the contribution for the fireworks, and that is included in your packet. And I don't know if, Mr. Chair, if Dave wants to add anything to that.
Does the Director of Community Action have anything to add?
The Director of Community Action would like to just say thanks again. It was a completely different scenario than it normally would be, but we couldn't have done it without the help from the city and the county, as well as the school district. And we really thank everybody for being a part of that. The feedback was fantastic, and we're going to be shooting them fireworks off as high as possible from now on, or as long as I'm in charge.
And Baxter.
Yeah, I apologize. Yes, the city of Baxter as well, and they were sent a thank you.
And then the last thing I just want to draw attention to in my report is we have had a request from the Evergreen Cemetery Board to have a joint meeting with their board as well as the Crow Wing County Board and the Brainerd City Council. At the time that I wrote this, they were trying to come up with a date. They have decided on August 26th at 4 p.m. at Evergreen Cemetery. So I guess at the August 17th meeting, I would recommend that we adjourn to that meeting. And with that, that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bergman. This brings us, do you have a question, Jan?
I do. Are we going to be doing like a Zoom on this? And I'm going to be recovering from surgery at that time. And I just wonder, are we going to have a Zoom meeting? It'll be a Zoom meeting, or since it's at the cemetery?
I think it's only in person.
Only in person. Well, then I will really, really try to get along to it then. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to council member reports. Alderman Pritchett.
Nothing to report.
Alderman Bevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did use the library curbside pickup from the time that my item that I requested was available. I had to wait 5 days to pick it up. Now that's 10 minutes per pickup. That's how active that thing is being used. So I looked at that as a great thing. That means 10 minutes, 6 times an hour, that thing, somebody's pulling up and picking something up. So I thought that would be great. Mr. Chair, is it possible that you give a report on my request to have the dispatch print a retraction on the fire department being reinstated?
I can update that. Yeah. So I reached out to Teresa. She's probably here, just on Twitter one evening, sent her a message saying that I'd really like a retraction. And she informed me they updated the online story. And I said, I saw that, but I'm receiving a lot of phone calls. So will you please print a written retraction of the story? Because the firefighters were not reinstated. They just filed to be reinstated, which is two very different things. And Teresa said she was going to bring it to the editorial board. I have not seen it in the printed dispatch to which I subscribe. So I don't think the editorial board thought it was that big of an error.
Well, really? Okay.
Weigh in on that if you guys want.
Oh yeah, Teresa, please do.
We did actually, there was a correction printed in the paper. I believe it was the Monday or Tuesday following the initial article. There was a correction in the e-edition, and then at the request of President Johnson, we also did print a correction in our print edition the following Sunday as well. So it has been in there twice.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for getting that done, Teresa. I did not know that. I did not see it. I should have read the paper closer.
And lastly, of course, is if Jan's going to be allowed to have the birds, I'm going to need some sunflower seeds. Thank you.
Alderman Lambert.
I am so sorry. I'm down in the Starbucks waiting for a granddaughter, and I have the birds. I have nothing. That's the only update I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Alderman Stunek.
I'll pass tonight. I have nothing.
Thank you, Alderman Tad Erickson.
Yeah, thank you. The only thing I'd like to add is on a personal note. Shortly after our last meeting on the 20th, my wife and I welcomed one of Brainerd's newest residents. We headed to the hospital that night, and on the 21st, we had our third child. So Oakley Rain, just wanted to mention that. I know several of you have asked. So.
Congratulations, Tad.
Thank you very much.
Alderman Wayne Erickson.
I have nothing.
Gabe here, I have nothing either. I want to again thank you, Teresa, for getting that update published, and sorry for not catching it when you did. And I forgot to let the mayor give his report, so he gets to finish tonight with the mayor's report.
Every single meeting, every meeting. Before the meeting tonight, I hit the batting cage with my son, and he's 13 now, so we're throwing a little bit more heat. And I pegged him to give him a little beat in the batter, and he followed right up by smacking a line drive right into my back. So I just want to thank all the kids that are out there still hitting the baseball. I know we had to close down our summer program, and I know that that means a lot to kids. But hopefully next year we'll be up and running again with something, and hopefully the kids of our area are still out there being active as much as they can. And hopefully most of them are retaliating when their dad hits them with the baseball.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion from Lambert.
Second.
Second from Pritchett. Roll call vote.
Lambert.
Yes.
Dunick.
Okay, then.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Bevins.
Aye.
W. Erickson. T. Erickson.
Yes.
And Johnson.
You betcha. We're adjourned. We'll see you all later.
Bye all. Thanks.
Good night.
Sayonara.